All right, welcome to the second series with the GenX teachers for Precepts for Skillful Engagement. I can't remember the rest of it. Basically, hopefully, the precepts would support you with these turbulent times. Um, Before I turn it over to our teacher today, Satya Robbins, I wanted to say there's a slight tweak in this series where we're going to record the teacher section, but not the Q&A, unlike the first series. All right. And now I pass it on to Satya. Thank you for being here and leading us today.
Thank you, Reverend Leanne. It's really lovely to be here and lovely to see you, everybody. Yeah, I don't think I've recognized you all, but some from previous classes. So my name is Satya, and I'm a minister in the Pure Land tradition, Japanese Pure Land tradition of Buddhism. I live in the UK and founded a temple about 11 years ago with my spouse, which we lived in for that time. And then we've just moved out of community to my great joy. We live in a little house on our own now with two little dogs and visit the temple and run practice with our colleague ministers. So just to give you a tiny little bit of context to who I am and what I do. And the plan for the next hour is that I will share some experience with you, which I think is all that I can ever do, is share what's been useful to me and hope that some of that translates in something that's useful for you. And then we'll have some time to listen to each other in pairs, just a kind of space where you can share anything that's arising through the topic today. And then there'll be a chance for any questions or comments, and then we'll finish with a recitation of the form of refuges that we use in our particular tradition, the Bright Earth tradition. So I thought that we might just begin. I did some training with Reverend Koyo Kabose, and the son of Guillaume Kabose, who you may or may not know. And he always began sessions with a centering breath, just a chance for us to all just kind of breathe together, just to kind of land in the space and land with each other. So just a centering breath. Thank you. And I do that for your benefit, but probably mainly my own. It's just really nice to feel a little bit of spaciousness opening up. So I will just introduce you to the form of our refuges to give some context to what I'll be saying. Do you want to pop them in the chat, Leanne? Is that okay, Leanne? And I'll just read them. We'll all read them together at the end, but I'll just read them so you can get an initial take on them. And when I say four refuges, we have unusually taken a fourth refuge in our Sangha, which is the earth. So the fourth refuge is the earth. With faith in the four refuges and in light of my human tendencies, I pray that I may become aware of when I take life. I pray that I may become aware of when I take what is not freely given. I pray that I may become aware of when I fall into sexual misconduct. I pray that I may become aware of when I fall into wrong speech. I pray that I may become aware of when I become intoxicated. So today we are speaking about taking life. Oh, I froze for a second, but I'm back. Hi, welcome, Lisa. Good to have you here. So I wanted to also, just before I share the story, which is the launch into the discussion about this first refuge, I wanted to just make an explicit link between what I'll be talking about and what's happening in the world, which is which is why these talks were originally set up. So for me, there's something about exploring my own fallibility through the refuges, whilst also knowing that I'm accepted by the Buddha just as I am, that helps me to encounter fallibility, stroke, all the way to violence in others, without without losing my steadiness, I guess. So that's just like a little kind of preview of where I'm heading, and we'll see if that's where I end up. So I wanted to talk to you about fungus gnats. Has anyone heard of fungus gnats? Yeah. So fungus gnats are very small black flies, and they infest the soil of houseplants. And I haven't had houseplants for, well, we were living in the temple. There was no light, so we didn't have any houseplants. But when we lived in the house before the temple, we had a few plants that became so infested with these little black flies that I can remember having to throw them all away. So we moved into our new house, this house here, last June, and I set about slightly compulsively buying houseplants. The bathroom is completely covered in various growing green things, and we have some in various rooms in the house. And to my horror, I noticed a fungus gnat. So my previous experience is that if I didn't get on top of it, it was just going to take, they were just going to take over, and I'd lose all my beautiful plants, or live in a kind of a cloud of fungus gnats in the house. So I started killing them. When they appeared, I would squash them. Meanwhile, I was researching how to get on top of them, how to eradicate them. There are various suggested ways of getting rid of them. You can buy little are they called nematodes? Nematodes, which get inside the fly and kill them, which sounds really horrible. You can water them less. You can repot the plant, which I did a few times, washing all the roots. I found on one forum, like deep in the depths of this forum, one man said that he'd bought these mosquito bits from France, a small packet for at great expense that you had to soak and sieve. So I bought a different sieve because it was like a poison, and I bought a different bowl, and went about applying this fluid to the plants. Didn't seem to make any difference at all. And meanwhile, some of the plants were becoming just really crazily infested. And I kept killing them, and I began to have this sort of reflex that whenever I saw something moving, I'd try and kill it, I'd go towards it and try and squash it. And what I noticed as I kind of went forwards in this battle with the fungus gnats, I noticed several things. I noticed that the instinct to kill was coming from fear, because I was afraid of being taken over by the fungus gnats. I was afraid of losing my plants. I noticed that anger and frustration arose when I was trying to control them, that it's like they were in control of me, and I needed to win. I needed to get my way with them. I needed to control them. I noticed, this is harder to acknowledge or admit, but I noticed that there was some pleasure that came with getting them because when I got them, that was one less fungus gnat that was going to reproduce and create thousands of more. I noticed that my desire to kill them coexisted with a sadness for them, that I felt regret at having to extinguish their lives, especially when they were just going about their business. And I also noticed that as time went on, the sadness that I felt, the regret that I felt about killing them became less and less and less. And it's like that compassionate kind of space. It, I was in denial of it. It was probably in there somewhere, but I was not connected with it. And I didn't care about them. I didn't care about them anymore. Um, so I'm sharing this with you, I guess, because it's a tiny example of actually killing something, which is this precept is sometimes harder for me to get my head around because I think, well, I don't kill people, so I don't need to worry about it. But this does involve killing. But it also scales up that my experience with wanting to kill these little things is kind of proof to me of my fallibility, of my my Bombu nature, is how I would put it as a Pure Land Buddhist. So Bombu is a word that means foolish beings of wayward passions. That we start from the position that we are like a cork kind of bobbing about on the waves of greed and hate and delusion, and that we are often more powerless than we would like to imagine against those actions that we take through fear that cause harm to others, that cause harm to other beings, and that cause harm to ourselves. And I have lots of other examples in my own life of actions or thoughts that I have that connect with killing or causing harm. I'm vegan, but I know that, for example, in every single match head is something called isinglass, which is a glue that's made from fish bladders. So every time I strike a match, I'm participating in that little bit of animal suffering. And I could not use matches, but I use matches because they're convenient. So that's a little tiny choice that I'm making. Our dogs were actually vegan for 7 years, and one of them's just been diagnosed as having bladder stones, and she's on a special diet. So she's eating chicken. She's eating kibble with chicken in. So I get to choose between a dog that forms more bladder stones or her eating chicken. Some of the choices we're making are difficult choices, but they're not all difficult choices, and that doesn't somehow I feel that doesn't let me off the hook for noticing the ways in which I participate in harming. And we could also think about how is it when we lose our temper at someone? How is it when we're short with someone? There are lots of things that we can kill that don't just involve life, someone's whole life. We can contribute to lowering someone's self-esteem, or we could buy things in the shops that are made by people who are suffering, or we can be silent about something. We can know that terrible things are happening in our country, in other countries, and we can it might not feel like a choice, but we can choose to not speak up about those things. We can choose to not get involved in whatever bits of activism we're able to do. We can choose to be in denial of that. Much as my habit was to be in denial of the harm that I was causing the fungus gnats, that this is how it is to be human, basically. That as human beings we are deeply vulnerable. Well, I'll speak for myself. As a human being, I feel deeply vulnerable. I feel afraid. I feel precarious. I have a lot of demands on me, lots of responsibilities, and I have various pockets of trauma that I carry or pockets of hurt. And so living involves making kind of pragmatic decisions, or not even making the decision, but doing things that are kind of possible, that doing the things that we're able to do. And those things sometimes are the kindest thing we could do, but often, speaking for myself, often they're not. Often I fall very short of my hopes for myself. Very, I feel very humbled by how bamboo I am. And I feel very blessed that I was able to encounter the Pure Land tradition, Honan and Shinran, and the men who also, as far as we can tell, were deeply ethical, disciplined, learned people who did a lot of good in their lifetime, who spoke up, who were brave, who were good men, but who each saw themselves as deeply flawed, as unable to perfect themselves or become enlightened or follow the precepts. That they noticed, the more they paid attention to themselves, they noticed more and more and more that they were always slipping up, always making the selfish choice, always deluding themselves or being thrown around by their desire for, I love that Shinran talks about how much he loves teaching, because then kind of people give him praise. You just don't hear people say that very much. Um, that yeah, that they were human, and that was their starting position, was their humanity. So why is it important to me to really acknowledge the depths of my breaking of the precepts, including this first one and all the others? I think probably wrong speech is my worst one, so I'm glad I didn't have to do the talk on that one. Why is it important to me to investigate the lengths that I will go to keep myself safe, to protect my vulnerability by breaking precepts in minor and not so minor ways? So I guess it's important for two different reasons. Um, One is that if I bring those flaws and fallibilities into the light, if I put them on the table, then I do have more choice about whether I can make a different decision or not. That I'm not in denial about my own actions. And that doesn't mean that I can't change them, because sometimes I can't, or I decide not to, but at least I know that it's happening. So that kind of deep sort of depth of awareness feels really important. And the other reason it really helps me to see my own fallibility is it really helps me to be patient and kind towards people that are awful. And, and some people are more awful than others. And I think that, or that some people carry out more awful behavior than others, or carry out more behavior that harms others than others. And I think, we all are encountering those people quite, every time I look at the headline in our national paper. It's what's Trump said now? What's happening? What's how is it flipping and flopping, and how is everyone else getting involved in that in ways that are complicated and harmful. Um, and I'm not I'm not here to say what I don't want to say is let's all just extend loving kindness to all the people that are doing awful things. What I'm saying is it helps me to not utterly condemn people that are causing great harm, to hold boundaries with them, to speak up against them, to take the actions that we can take, which are, often small but important, but to hold that within this kind of container of human beings are fallible and vulnerable, and that they protect themselves in different ways, and that people that are killing others, that is the way that they are trying to survive psychically, that psychologically we are violent when it's the thing we need to do in order to not be overcome with shame, or be overcome with feeling just so awful about ourselves that we couldn't live with ourselves. And that's not to say that it's okay, and that's not to say that we we forgive them even, but it gives me that framing. And it helps me to have courage, I guess, to face that in other people. And because I face it in myself, or I work to face it in myself. And I should have brought the Buddha in earlier, but I'll bring them in now. All of this is only possible for me because I know that the Buddha loves me and accepts me just as I am. And that's something we repeat all the time in our tradition, just as you are. That beautiful poem by Inagaki, just as you are, really, just as you are. And feeling that in my being allows me to see more of my dysfunction and my darkness, because I know that the Buddha's already seen it all, and they're really fine with it because they get it. They understand why I am that way. And this is harder to imagine sometimes, but the Buddha also sees the dysfunction of the people that are causing great harm in a systemic way. And the Buddha accepts them. The Buddha gets why they are doing that. I kind of feel like it makes the Buddha sad to see those things. Like it's not like they're going, yay, go you, but they understand that those actions come from a deep compulsion to survive, to psychologically survive, and that the only option that feels available to those people is one that leads to great awful harm. Um, and the more that I receive that love of the Buddha, the more I'm able to see my own fallibility. And the more I see my own fallibility, the more that I naturally turn towards the love of the Buddha, to allow that to be accepted and I was going to say purified, because I think that can be a natural process that Shinran talks about, the turning of the ice of our greed, hate, and delusion into water through the love. Sometimes that does happen, and sometimes it doesn't. But even knowing that I will continue to get things wrong and make unwise decisions, it's just easier to be alive, just knowing that, yeah, knowing that I'm loved. And that is a work, that's an ongoing work in progress for me. Um, yeah. And I guess the last thing to say, maybe before we have some spare, I'm talking at you for a really long time. Thank you for being so patient. The last thing to say before we check in with each other is that I feel like there's this constant sort of movement for me um, between being able to see the reality of my humanness, my fallibility, without that tipping me into kind of self-hate or self that kind of critical self stuff that isn't helpful for me, I don't think. Um, and on the other side, there's a being in denial about that and just not looking at it at all. So that's the sort of the balance that I take with this kind of work. And sometimes, if I'm already not feeling great, I'm not going to push myself to do more self-reflection and confession, self-confession. But then if I'm feeling sort of pretty smug, or if I'm feeling quite kind of robust, then it does feel more possible to acknowledge, to take accountability for more of what I do or who I am. So all of this, I hope that what you're not hearing is that I'm encouraging a kind of a self-critical voice. That's not it at all. All of this is held in love, and all of it is held in the Buddha's love. So really, it's about seeing those parts of ourselves through the Buddha's eyes, so that they're seeing the truth, but seeing it with that kind of gentleness and love, and not pushing us to feel worse. If we already feel bad, then maybe don't work with the precepts for a little while, or just kind of absorb some more of the love before you do some more. So I do have a question for the prompts, a prompt for the conversations, and I'm just wondering if it's the right one. Um, if you like, you can talk about uh, how this precept is for you. Like, how is it to not take life or to not harm? Like, what's challenging for you? But I'd also maybe just extend the invitation to share anything that's come up for you during my what I've been saying, anything you disagree with, anything that kind of strikes home, anything you don't like, you feel resistance to, anything you like the sound of, to just kind of have a chance to share that.